Welcome once again to an episode of Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here with us today. Thanks for joining us. We get to talk with today a mindfulness expert. If I could talk, I'd be in good shape. A TEDx speaker and a person who I've really come to enjoy and get to know. She also has a company, Mindfulness Career Path. We're going to get to all of that as we go forward, but I'd like you to meet Alicia Ramsdell. Alicia, how are you?
Michael, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And Alicia lives north of Boston. And as we were talking earlier, I lived in Winthrop, Massachusetts, and was there for 3 years and worked with a company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Kurzweil Computer Products, for a number of years in and around that. But I was in Boston and New York during the big blizzard of 78, which a lot of people don't remember, but it was quite the snowstorm and quite the time.
I believe it. I'm not going to tell you if I was born then or not, but
no, it's okay.
My parents tell me about it.
Well, as I was mentioning just before we came on, I used to frequent Durgan Park in Quincy Market, and I've heard that it closed down. And Durgan Park was a restaurant that was very famous for family-style food and service, and they would not let you sit at one of the tables on the side for 4 people unless there were 4 of you. They made people sit in family style, and that was fine. But we went in one night. There were several of us. Actually, I think there were only 3 of us, but I had my guide dog with me. At that time, it was Holland, my second guide, who was a wonderful, beautiful male golden retriever. And the hostess said, just to make it easy, we're going to put you at one of the tables for 4. And I said, well, we're going to get in trouble for that. And she said, no, you won't. Well, sure enough, the waitress came over and they're all trained to be real snots. And she said, you can't sit here. There are only 3 of you and you can't sit here. And I said, well, the hostess said that we could sit here. No, she didn't. Yeah, she did, because I have a guide dog. Oh, I'm not going to fall for that. You don't have a dog. I don't see a dog. Well, Holland was well under the table and the tablecloth came down, so she wouldn't have seen him. And she kept saying, no, you can't be here. And she walked away, and then she came back. She said, you're going to have to move. And I said, look, there is a guide dog under the table. We were told we could sit here. She finally at least lifted up the tablecloth, and there are these brown eyes looking out at her from under the table. And she goes, oh, what a cute dog. And she walks away and she comes back with a plate. Now, Durgan Park was known for its prime rib, and the prime rib was so large that it would hang over the sides of the plate sometimes. Anyway, she had this and she said, a customer didn't finish it. Can I give it to the dog? For customer relations, I would normally say no, but I said, oh, sure. So we made a friend for life. It was so funny because the nastiness went away.
Nobody can be in a foul mood when they see a golden retriever.
Yeah, staring back at him. And Holland was quite happy with prime rib. Well, that's our Boston story for the moment anyway, but I'm really glad that we have a chance to be here. So tell us a little about you, maybe growing up and the earlier Alicia and all that stuff.
Certainly. So as you mentioned, I grew up in and still live north of Boston, Massachusetts. And for a long time as a child, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I realized myself, actually, I have a golden retriever. I've had 3 golden retrievers throughout my lifetime. So I've always really enjoyed having a pet. But as soon as I realized that veterinarians had to, handle the surgery side of things, I knew that I couldn't stomach it. So I had to switch my thinking about where I would go, beyond my childhood dreams of being a veterinarian. And as I moved on, I became really good at math, and my future took me to accounting and tax, and not as exciting as being a veterinarian, but there was a lot of job security around there. And the business program that I went through, the school that I went to, had an excellent reputation. I made a lot of lifelong friends from there, and my career was 15 plus years in the accounting and tax industry. And although I really never loved what I was doing, I got to meet a lot of wonderful people along the way. And like I said before, have the job security that comes along naturally with the tax and accounting industry. But fast forward to the present day, I left the accounting and tax industry in 2019, and I started my business, Mindful Career Path. And really, what that stemmed from was I saw a gap in the industry, or I should say within corporate America in general, of lacking career development conversations where people could feel that they could be vulnerable without any sort of backlash to it. A lot of people want to talk about developing in their careers, but sometimes with the internal resources, they were shy or hesitant to speak freely about where they were in their career, where they see things weren't working or what was working. So I wanted to create a career development coaching business where I would come in as the external consultant and have one-on-one confidential conversations with employees to help with their career development, allow them to be vulnerable in their conversations, and also add into that understanding their stress levels and helping them through mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. So that started in the beginning of 2020, and now towards the end of 2023, I really haven't looked back since.
Is your business at home?
Yeah, remotely. Yeah. So which COVID was not a good thing for the world.
Yeah.
But it worked out that the remote style of professionalism allows me now to work out of the comfort of my home, but at the same time globally. So I have clients that are, in Europe, in the United States, and Asia, and so forth. And there's so much power and benefit to be able to work with people globally and understand the various cultures as well.
And that's why I asked the question, because you certainly were a lot more easily able to lock down than people, since in a sense you were already working where you lived. So it was kind of easier probably to address that issue.
Absolutely. And beyond COVID, if you think about it, a lot of individuals were experiencing overwhelming stress just because of the change in their regular lifestyle. So the combination of career development coaching, but with that mindfulness-based stress reduction approach, was extremely beneficial to any individual, and it didn't matter which industry they were in.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. And you were certainly able to do that. We locked down. My wife had rheumatoid arthritis, so we really were very sensitive to it. But I mostly worked virtually and remotely. So I worked from home and continue to work from home, except for when I'm traveling, obviously. But it makes a lot of sense. And the reality is we can make working virtually or working from home as easy or as hard as we want. And it really is a choice. And the fact of the matter is it does work pretty well if we want it to be able to work from home rather than always having to go into an office somewhere.
Absolutely. And to add to that point, I certainly see the benefit of building relationships in person and the difference between, a virtual setting and an in-person setting. But the flexibility, like you said, of that remote capability really allows us to grow leaps and bounds in our businesses as well as professionally when we want to connect with, people halfway across the world.
You indicated that you're certified in mindfulness-based stress reduction and organizational mindfulness. How do you get certified in that?
Sure. So I don't know if you've heard of Jon Kabat-Zinn, but he's kind of the godfather of mindfulness. And he started this program out of the UMass Medical School, MBSR program, so mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And I started this program, and I think it was 2019. Now I'm forgetting the specific year, but through a recommendation of a friend of mine who was going through, previously he had went through his own really overwhelming, stressful moments in his world. And I was explaining to him, this business I was considering creating and my own stressors in my life. And he recommended this program, and he said it was life-changing. So it was a pretty incredible program that I went through. It was a remote opportunity, but we learned various forms of meditation and mindfulness and so forth. So body scan meditation, we learned, mindful eating, mindful walking, I think it was chair yoga and so forth. So there were a lot of opportunities there. And then this organizational mindfulness program really stemmed from, it was sort of an extension of this MBSR program. And it had more of a focus around professionals in their corporate settings and how you could apply these techniques within the corporate setting or as a leader.
So what is mindfulness, if you were to define it?
Certainly. So not really my own definition, more something that I've learned through the teachings of Jon Kabat-Zinn, but it's really being present in the current moment, non-judgmentally. So you're aware of what's happening without judgment. And that's a pretty basic definition, but it allows you to be in a moment in a neutral state, if you can think of it that way. So whether there's highs or lows, whatever the environment calls for, you can be in that state non-judgmentally, be in this neutral state, and be able to better reflect on it moving forward than getting really high about it or really low about it, and kind of making, as you would call it, like a rash decision in the given moment, in the heat of the moment. So that's the way that Jon Kabat-Zinn explains it. And that's something that has resonated with me, thinking back to my own stressors. And I'll just pause there for a moment.
That's okay. It seems to me that one of the things that is really important for people to think about is, especially in our world today, mindfulness relating to fear. How does mindfulness help one deal with fear and not, as I would call it, being blinded or overwhelmed by fear when something unexpected happens, or just with everything going on in the world?
So throughout my journey, if you're thinking about fear or like failures or setbacks, I've developed this consistent mindfulness practice, and it's been instrumental in how I handle situations of fear. It's really taught me the importance of being non-judgmental and fully present in those moments of setback, of fear. And instead of pushing it away or trying to avoid the emotions altogether, I've learned to sit with the emotions and allow myself to fully experience it. And what this does is it really creates a space for reflection and self-awareness, and it enables you to gain some insights into what's the best way to move forward. And that's kind of a general theme, but that wasn't always the way I did things. In my previous life, as I like to call it, I didn't have a meditation practice. So I used to rely on this notion that, that failures or fear would eventually subside on its own. But as time went on, I realized that this approach only added more pressure to that situation. And it became so overwhelming in my life that I started experiencing physical manifestations of this stress, to the point where I felt like walls were closing in around me. So that at those points in my life is when I consciously made the decision to integrate mindfulness and meditation into my daily routine. And this shift really allows you a way to cultivate a sense of calm and resilience when you do face these challenges, when you do face these fears. And it can help you throughout those fears have a greater sense of clarity and not to become overwhelmed by those emotions.
Does being mindful help you, or would it help us to address the issue of we're always trying to control everything, and the reality is we don't have control over everything in the world, and that we really need to focus on the things that we have control over as opposed to all the other stuff that we don't, that we let stress us out? Does that make sense?
So repeat the question one more time.
When you talk about being mindful, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that people are always stressed out because things are happening, and most of it is stuff they have no control over. Does mindfulness help one focus on dealing with just the things that you do have control over, and lessening the worry or eliminating the worry about all the things you can't control?
So mindfulness, from that perspective, right? There are things, you're right, that we can control, and there are things that we can't control. Well, what mindfulness does is it allows you to be aware of what you can control and what you can't control. Because sometimes in life, we think we can control everything.
Or we want to.
Exactly. We want to control everything. So it becomes overwhelming to think, why is this situation going this way? And why can't I control it? But what mindfulness lets you do is sit in that moment and be able to reflect. And then once you get outside of being in the present moment, not judgmentally, you can say, what can I do about this? Is this out of my control? Is this in my control? If it's out of my control, then you can move on in a different direction. Or if it's in your control, you can build a strategy around, how to make this go differently moving forward. But it just really, what it does, it really doesn't set up for control or lack of control. Right. It just allows you to be aware of where that control lies and where it doesn't, and be able to move forward with that realization.
Does the fact that if you practice mindful techniques regularly, does all of that become easier?
For me, it personally has. Some people fear when they start their mindfulness practice or meditation practice that, I can't shut off my mind. It's always running. And that's a myth. Meditation is not for shutting your mind off or clearing your mind. Again, somebody once said this example and it really stuck with me. So I'm going to share it again, knowing that it's not my own, but it's, imagine you were sitting on the side of a busy road and cars are going in every direction. And you tried to walk out onto that road and, stick your hands up and tell everybody to stop. There would be chaos. There'd be confusion. There would be cars crashing into each other. Why is there a person in the middle of the road? So that's as if you were trying to control the practice. Meditation is more, think about yourself staying on that side of the road, having a lounge chair, sitting down on that lounge chair and just watching the traffic go by. Not trying to stop anything, but realize it's happening. Hey, this is a busy road.
Yeah.
And so as you have that mindset going into starting a meditation practice or starting a mindfulness practice, that's where you start to grow, rather than assuming you have to clear your mind or anything like that.
Yeah, I started doing transcendental meditation in college and have appreciated not only that, but just the whole concept of meditation ever since. And I've maintained for a number of years that we don't do nearly as much introspection and looking at ourselves and what we do and why we do it and how we can fix it as we should. I used to say all the time when I listen to speeches I've given, I'm my own worst critic. And I realized in the last couple of years, wrong thing to say. I'm not my own worst critic. I read somewhere that in reality, the only one who can teach me anything is me. Other people can give me all the information, but I have to be the one to teach me to do it. And what I've realized is I'm not my own worst critic. I'm my own best teacher, which is also a lot more positive anyway. And we don't say nearly enough positive things. So it just seems to be that's a very powerful thought to have.
Certainly. And you've hit on two really great points. The self-talk that we give each other, our brain doesn't know if it's reality or if it's just something we're thinking. So if it can't decipher between reality and just thoughts in your head, why not give positive self-talk? Not to give fake self-talk, but positive self-talk, to say, like you said, I'm my own best teacher. And you flipped it and gave it a different perspective. And that's what you start to believe. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, you talked about transcendental meditation. That's actually where I started as well. And I read a book called Strength and Stillness by Bob Roth. Mm-hmm. And that was the start of my, meditation and mindfulness education. Really, it was self-taught, talking about being your own best teacher.
Have you ever read 10% Happier by Dan Abrams?
I have not.
Dan is from on Good Morning America and so on. And he wrote this book several years ago, and it's his journey in meditation. And he, I don't think primarily does transcendental meditation, but he does meditate, and it's made a significant difference in his connection on the air and just in him in general. And so he describes it as being 10% happier.
Yeah, I love it. I'll put it on my list of books to read.
It's well worth reading. Well, you have been dealing with, obviously, like all of us, different habits and so on. What's a habit that you had to change or that you decided to change as you were going down your journey? And why did you change that in order to achieve your goals?
So let's start when I was younger. I used to believe that there were specific paths that you had to follow in order to be successful in life. And wherever that part of your life was what it was. So this belief stayed with me as I grew up and even into my adult years. So when I was younger, I thought that maintaining friendships meant always being agreeable, like borderline submissive. However, as I got older, I realized the importance of being confident in who I was and staying true to myself. And it was through this authenticity that I started to form deeper friendships, deeper relationships with people who truly accepted and loved me for who I was. And similarly, that I use that same mindset when it came to careers later on in life. I believe that there were a certain set of rules and a specific formula for achieving a successful career. And in the earlier days of my career, I play by those rules, right? Simon Sinek has the book out. I think it's called The Infinite Game. He talks about, finite game and infinite game, and finite game has, a certain set of rules and the same number of players or certain players within it. But I realized that I was playing by these rules and I didn't really advocate for myself or trust my own instincts. But as time went on, I learned the value of trusting my intuition and also standing up for myself in my career. And I discovered that success really isn't found with a predetermined path. I needed to embrace my unique strengths and then from there pursue the opportunities that aligned with those strengths, right? That made sense in the values that I held in the professional passions that I wanted to pursue.
And of course, it's important to keep in mind that success is different for each of us, and success doesn't even necessarily need to be material, but we are always talking about we need to be successful, and we really need to define what that means for us and not how everybody else wants to define it for us.
I couldn't agree more. And like you said, not only is success different for different people, there's also different timelines. I used to think that, okay, once you graduate college, you need to have a job right away. You can't take any time off. Or same with high school. Once you graduate high school, you can't take any time off before you go to college. I had all these predetermined paths that I had to stay on for me to be successful. But honestly, some of the most successful people I know, like uber successful, didn't graduate college, or they graduated college and they never went to grad school, or, they didn't have a family started at the age of 35, or, whatever the rules were. There are a lot of successful people, and it's different timelines and different setups as well.
If we talk about success in a materialistic sort of way, it seems to me that if you're really going to look at why are you successful, whoever you are, it really comes down to the choices that you make and that you made. And can you really go back and look at those choices and see what you learned along the way?
Absolutely. I created this 4-quadrant strategy to career fulfillment, and it's a reflection exercise, and we can go through it later, but it's a reflection exercise that really dives into where are your successes, where are you thriving, where do you want to learn more? And then on the flip side, kind of where are you successful but don't care to pursue more, and where do you just have responsibilities and don't care to pursue more? But it really allows you that time to bring awareness to what's working, what's not working. Again, be non-judgmental about it, but then build a strategy moving forward on what to pursue.
Yeah. It still all comes back to you choosing to be self-analytical and introspective in order to really look at what you're doing and what works and what isn't working. And I stay away from using the word failure because it has such a negative connotation. But I do believe, as some have said, that failure is really just an opportunity to learn. And so I don't regard failure as a negative thing, but rather is a way to have something that comes along and says, okay, what are you going to learn from this? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we really need to look at a lot of things in different ways than we do. Do you think that we're changing our attitudes collectively on some of these things and that we're learning some of the concepts that we're talking about here?
I think since COVID, I think people are really trying to implement being more, taking more time for self-reflection, taking more time for our mental health, whether you use, mindfulness as a whole or specifically meditation. But I think, from a career perspective, organizations are trying to implement this, not just idea, but, actionable items that people can use to really make sure that we're going in a direction that's not just beneficial to the organization, but also to us as individuals. And I don't think we're 100% there yet, but I think there's more awareness around everything that we're talking about today. And I'm hopeful, as younger generations who kind of lived through COVID in maybe high school days or even their college days, and this is all they've known since they came into the professional world. And as they become the leaders, right, there are future leaders within organizations and so forth. I think that we're only going to get better from here, given the perspective of pursuing professional interests that really speak to yourself and really benefit an organization's mission, vision, values, and then also being aware of our mental health and our, overall well-being.
Well, for me, I know just in talking about what you're describing here, it seems to me that we really need to learn from history more than in the past we have, and that we need to recognize that history is history, and it can be a valuable tool for us. For me, somewhere along the line, as I was speaking, I suddenly realized as I went to schools, I'm talking to students who never had any direct personal knowledge of September 11th. And that now it's history to them. And I need to recognize that if I want to really communicate with them. And my job as someone who was there is to draw them in. And so I love to, people say, are you really bothered about telling your story? Well, I love to tell the story if I can get people to be drawn in and really see what happened that day and internalize it so that they make it part of their history as well, rather than it just being something that happened. And I think that's true for most anything that we do. So I think you're right. The more we can talk about it, the more we can make conversations about things like mindfulness, what the significance is, and really tell stories to help people understand that, the better it will be, because as we have people growing up, they're hearing more about it. And by really drawing them in, they'll internalize it more, it seems to me.
Yeah. And you're right. With the example of September 11th, it's a part of the history books. And for those younger individuals who didn't live through, whether you were there or just lived through watching it on TV while it was happening, the stories that people share really bring it to life. And, just to say it out loud, I recently read your book, Thunderdog, and it was a side of September 11th that I had never experienced. And of course, I've seen the footage, I've heard as many stories I possibly can, but every time you hear somebody else's account of the day, it brings it all back, like it was happening all over again. So it was an incredible book that you wrote.
Well, my wife is one of the people who said, remember, for so many people, September 11th was only as large as their television screen or the pictures they saw in the newspaper. And she absolutely was right about that. Yeah. But the other part about it is that even on that day, so on September 11th, I eventually was able to get up toward Midtown Manhattan and get onto a train to go back over to New Jersey. And people even on that train said, you're all dirty and dusty. Were you there? Well, what happened? Even then I began to hear and start to recognize these people were only a couple of miles away, but to them, they didn't see it. It really wasn't the same as being there. And, the only thing I think that I can do to help history and to help people is to, in a sense, and not in a negative way, but make September 11th alive so that people understand the choices that got us there, the choices that got me there, the choices that got me out, and why remembering it is so important. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's, it is one of those things. Well, so, we talked about you changing beliefs and so on. If you could go back and talk to a younger Alicia and give her one piece of advice, what would that be? And then as she grew up, how would that have impacted her life, which means it would have impacted your life?
So I'd love to pick just one thing, but I might.
I know it's hard. It's okay. You can.
I might go on a tangent with 3.
Go ahead.
So first of all, I would tell my younger self to start practicing meditation earlier in my life. It's really amazing how much clarity and peace of mind can come from taking a few moments a day to focus in on the present moment, not judgmentally, right? I go through anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes a day of meditation. And I do it at the very beginning of my day, right after I wake up. So it sets me up for obviously a positive start, but a clearer start, which is nice too. And then second, I would really encourage myself to trust my gut, trust my intuition more. I won't say all the time, but most of the time, our gut feelings can really guide us in the right direction, even when logic and reason can suggest otherwise. But learning to listen to my inner voice and trusting it, I believe really could have led to some incredible opportunities and personal growth. Now, I don't regret things that I did, previously, because it got me to where I am today. But if I could go back, that's what I would share with my younger self. And then one maybe silly thing, but I think it could really benefit myself and a lot of other people is I think I would urge myself to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a great physical activity, of course, but I've heard the benefits and I haven't done it yet, right? The mental health benefits. It's consistently challenging yourself in that regard is on a mat, but what it's doing, it's improving your mental focus. It's improving your problem-solving abilities, right? You're on this mat and you have this unique opportunity to test out solutions and then receive immediate impact, immediate feedback and say, did this work? No. How could I get out of this situation? But you're not allowed to panic on the mat. And I think that we were talking before about fear. A lot of what comes with fear is panic, right? That initial moment of panic. And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can really help with the problem solving, could really help with critical thinking. And it's a physical form, so it's good exercise. But I've heard and I want to put it into practice. And I feel like as I get older, I become more fearful of starting it. So that's why I would have told my younger self to start early.
Well, time to jump in and try it.
I know.
And then you're going to have to come back and talk with us about it so we can hear how it goes.
I will. I'm hoping it goes well.
When are you going to start?
I don't know.
Ah,
I have to set it up, but that's my goal
I'm
to
not
really
from
do that.
I'm not familiar with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I must admit I don't exercise probably as much as I should. One of the things that I've done, I've started doing a lot more walking, and in the winter it gets cold here in Victorville, so
Yeah.
I discovered that I can still walk around the house. We have a long island. It's probably about a 10-foot long island, and so I've started doing laps around the island, and I'll read a book or sometimes just think while I'm doing it. But I can get well over 10,000 steps just walking around that bar. Now it's level, it's not a hill, or around that
Yeah.
island. It's not hills, but my Apple Watch says, great, you got in 10,000 steps today. So I can't argue totally with that.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to get exercise, and I can do it even in the house. And what I'm really saying is we can always find ways to accomplish things like that if we choose to.
Yeah. Walking around an island, 10,000 steps, or walking 10,000 steps outside, your brain doesn't know the difference. It just knows that you're walking.
Yeah. And it doesn't care. And,
Yeah.
and so I can do it, and it goes really well. So my brain and my Apple Watch like the idea. So I get the information, and it's really kind of cool. So I basically try to do that every day. And it's a way that I also can, while I'm doing that, think and sometimes meditate. Although best meditations are when you can sit and relax, and it isn't a fake or a hokey thing to do that. But if you're really going to meditate, then you need to allow yourself to drift and not try to make choices or do anything while you're meditating, but you've got to let your brain relax as well and look at the day.
And that's the beauty of meditation. You don't have to do anything. You just sit there in that present moment with your thoughts, and you can have a focus point, right? Whether that be your breath or anything else. But every time your mind shifts to a thought or a worry or a concern, acknowledge it, and then bring it back to that focus point. So like I said, with your breath, think of like a flashlight leaving the spot that it was originally on, just bringing that flashlight back to that spot.
And looking at why it's there, and what, if anything, can you really do about it anyway?
Right.
And it's fair to think about what can you do about it, if anything, anyway. Again, it gets back to not trying to control every little thing that comes along.
Exactly.
So with all the things that you're doing regarding mindset, which I find fascinating and absolutely relevant, how do you handle failure? And when you're dealing with setbacks, how do you handle those? And what strategies have you adopted to deal with that?
Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier, but really my mindfulness practice has helped me throughout my life and failures, or when I started this process. So it was in my days of corporate America, I really started my mindfulness practice. So specifically for me, like I mentioned before, it's 20 to 45 minutes every morning when I first wake up. And what this allows me to do is that I know that failures and setbacks are going to happen throughout my days. This gives me a chance to just sit with those feelings, sit with those emotions, in a sense, peacefully. And then I feel like when I do get out of the meditation practice, I then work out and exercise. I then focus on, getting my kids off to school. From there, I go outside and I take my dog for a walk. So I'm getting that sunlight. I'm getting that extra exercise with walking outside with the fresh air. And by the time I come back and have a healthy breakfast, whatever failures and setbacks I was worried about from the day before, starting my day the way I do between a meditation practice and exercise practice, getting a walk in outside, getting that sunlight, having a healthy breakfast, I feel like almost like Superwoman. I can kind of handle anything because I've empowered myself physically and mentally for the day. And I almost accept the fact that I shouldn't even say almost. I do accept the fact that failures and setbacks are going to come along the way. So I think it's a part of being realistic and not kind of putting your head in the sand like, oh, I'm not going to have any failures or setbacks. This is going to go swimmingly. I prep myself to say, when something does go wrong, this isn't what I want you to do, Alicia, right? I want you to sit with the emotions of it not going right, kind of journaling what happened specifically without emotion involved. What specifically happened? It's like, oh, I'm really upset because this person didn't call when they were supposed to, or this person didn't show up to a meeting, or I was late because of a traffic situation, or whatever it was. Without emotion, it's this happened, this happened, this happened. Very matter of fact. And then coming back to it and saying, okay, moving forward, what if that didn't happen? How would that have set me up for success? And kind of going backwards, working from what did happen, working our way backwards, and then trying to go back forward. I know that sounds a little convoluted, but I'm trying to figure out what were the specific actions that didn't allow it to happen, and then say, okay, well, if that didn't happen, what would have been more successful, or what would have been better about the situation?
Have you ever had
a strategy? Yeah,
have you ever had any real major setback in your life that just completely threw you off your game, and how did you deal with that?
Well, being in corporate America for 15 years, I faced a pivotal moment after the end of that when I had to make a decision to leave and start my own business. Now, no, I didn't have to start my own business. I could have stayed in corporate America,
Right.
But it was a challenging decision for me because I had to let go of job security.
Yeah.
For me, that's a significant step, considering my backgrounds in accounting and tax with an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, and extensive experience that I had gained in the industry. But I discovered that in my days in corporate America, that, like I said before, there was a gap in career development landscape within corporate America. There were a lot of internal resources that provided employee support, but I noticed, again, like I said, there was a need for confidential one-on-one conversations, career development conversations, and many individuals were hesitant to openly discuss their career aspirations and their challenges with internal resources. So what I did with Mindful Career Path is I set this framework up where we combine career development, one-on-one coaching in a confidential setting. Think of like, the doctor-patient confidentiality, and then while also addressing individual stress levels. So for me, the difficult piece came when at the end of my corporate America days, I was going through a toxic work situation. And I was trying to handle it internally and stay there internally because of the fear of leaving job security. I never really imagined myself as someone who would take the risk to be, a business owner. But I had a lot of self-doubt in leaving, right? That whole imposter syndrome. Can I really do this? Can I really start my own business? But after dealing with some toxic work environment factors, I realized I only have this one life to live. Do I choose to stay in toxicity for another 15 years just because I felt there was job security? Or do I take those next 15 years, even 5 years, even 1 year, and try to make a difference for anybody else not to experience the same thing I was experiencing in that moment, right? Offer up this career development conversation, offer up mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques to individuals. So that was a really difficult decision for me. And I think what I learned, again, I talked about this before, is trusting my intuition, trusting my gut. And I'm glad I did, because as I said before, I started this in 2020 and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, we often just choose not to listen to that inner voice. And I'm glad that you do. It is an important thing. I love to use the example of Trivial Pursuit. How many times does somebody play Trivial Pursuit and the question comes up, whatever it is, and an answer flashes in their mind, but then they go, oh, no, that can't be it. And so that's not the answer they give, and it invariably was the right answer.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true.
Happens all too often.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's a great teaching tool to try to teach us to use our inner voice more. And I know that when I do that and I listen, more often than not, it is the right answer. And people say, how come you know so much? And, how do you tell them you got to listen to your inner voice? You can tell them that and they don't listen. But nevertheless, that's what it is, because oftentimes it's about something I've never heard of before, or I just don't know anything about.
Yeah.
That inner voice picks up on so many things that we don't.
Yes. Yeah. And it's something that I think comes with time. It comes with experience. It comes with age, to say, remember that time I didn't listen to my gut or my intuition and see how it went? Why not give it a shot? So I think it's more about building up that confidence level to trust your gut, to trust your intuition.
But it is something that you have to practice doing, and you have to make a conscious decision to do it. And sometimes when it just doesn't seem like you should do it, you still have to decide that's what I've got to do, because it will give you the better answer, whatever that is.
Absolutely.
Well, so what do you do? So by the way, you got two kids. How old are the children?
11 and 10.
Oh boy. Boys?
Yeah. One boy and one girl.
One of each. Well,
yeah.
That gives you broad. Is there a Mr. in the scene, in the picture?
Yes. Yep. And my husband. Yep.
What does he do?
He works in the investment management industry.
Does he trust his gut?
Yes,
Good,
he does.
Good thing.
For the most part. If not, I help him with that. But yes, for the most part, he trusts his gut.
Well, that's a good thing. Well, you've got, a cool family. I have a dog and a cat, and I haven't mentioned Stitch. So this is the first time that Stitch the cat has been involved in listening and watching a podcast. So I've talked about Stitch the kitty many times, but here she is. There's Stitch the cat. And we welcome Stitch to Unstoppable Mindset too. She's been very quiet. She hasn't yelled or anything. So she's been very comfy up here on the chair, which is great. What do you do?
Very nice guest.
Oh, she's a great guest. Yeah. And then Alamo, the guide dog, is over here. He's here most of the time. He says, I'll just lay down and listen. I don't need to do anything. What do you do when outside of work to relax and so on? I know we talked about meditation, but in a sense, I'm not sure that's totally outside work. What else do you do for playtime?
Yeah, so
besides thinking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but that's another story.
Exactly. Yeah. So one area that there's really two things that I guess kind of like light me up when I'm outside of work. So one area I'm really passionate about is living, and this might not sound fun to other people, but really living an overall healthy lifestyle. So I really like to learn more about how can I optimize my sleep? How can I engage more in mindfulness activities, as we've talked about? How can I get regular exercise? How can I, nourish my body with healthy food choices? But even beyond that, it's become more of like a family affair where my husband does a lot of research on this, and we've gotten our kids involved in really understanding the background of this. But things like, grounding, right? Bare feet on the ground outside, getting that much needed sunlight, being mindful of the skincare products we put on our skin. And as a family, we're really trying to embrace this more like a holistic approach to health and wellness. So that's something that we talk about often. And I think just the excitement of living a healthy lifestyle, the excitement of longevity moving forward. But then another area that really, lights me up is working with youth, right? And that could be in two different dimensions, really, but it all relates to building youth confidence. So for me, it's coaching youth sports. It's getting involved in programs at the high school level, like the business DECA chapter, which inspires high school students, into their professional or business pursuits. And I teach also at the college level. And again, I do this because I really enjoy seeing the positive impact on the lives of these whether young individuals as kids or young adults in college. And it fills me with a deep sense of fulfillment that I could have a positive influence and watch their confidence levels grow no matter what capacity that's in, right? Again, sports, professional pursuits when they're thinking about it in high school or even in college classroom. And so those are two different things, but coincidentally, they're very much related kind of to my professional passions.
Where do you teach in college?
I teach in Beverly at Endicott College.
Okay. Well, that is pretty cool and exciting. We haven't talked about the fact that you've written a book.
Yes, well, a children's book. I wrote a children's book, and it's called The One and Only Incredible Me.
Well, tell us about that, if you would, please.
Sure. It stems from, again, the work that I do professionally. And then I get so excited to talk about it to really anybody. But I even talk about my work to my kids, which I never did before when I was in accounting and tax, as you could imagine. But I would talk to my kids about, hey, you can grow up to be, whatever it is that you would like to be, as long as you put in the effort and you have the knowledge base and so forth. And I said, a lot of people along the way are going to make suggestions to you. Oh, you should be this, or you should do this, or you should do that. And I said, and you don't have to do that if it doesn't make sense for you. But again, it's kind of reflecting on what do you want rather than what does everyone else expect of you. So the book, The One and Only Incredible Me, is kind of a fun way to explore, hey, well, when I was younger, my preschool teachers said, oh, he's going to be an architect one day. And then my high school teacher saw I was good at math, and they said, oh, he's going to be an engineer one day. And it kind of keeps going on. And it's an interactive book to say, all these wonderful people in my life suggested I was this, this, and this. But I wasn't that in the end. Guess what I was? I do this, and I really love what I do. So it's not to, lessen the impact of well-intentioned adults in our lives, but it's just to promote our own self-awareness and, excitement to engage in whatever pursuits that we want professionally moving forward.
Mr. Campbell was my freshman in high school geography teacher. And I don't know why I am as I am, but I was brought up to value what my teachers tell me. And I remember lots of different things and lots of different kinds of concepts that my teachers brought to my attention. And a lot of times they were not necessarily in the subjects that the teachers were teaching. And for example, Mr. Campbell once said he did all sorts of tests when he was younger to decide what he wanted to do. And everything pointed to the fact that he should be a plumber. But yet he ended up being a geography teacher. And I would still to this day say a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine this world without him because of the impact that he had on you if he had went down, the plumber route.
Yeah. And, I remember things about geography, although I don't remember what exactly to attribute to him, but I remember that lesson from him. And I've had others like that from teachers. And when they're speaking from the heart like that, it really does tend to stick with you. And I think it is, as you point out, really important for us to really recognize that we are our own selves and it is our choices. And the earlier we can learn about making good choices or making choices and valuing those choices, even if they don't turn out right, using that information to grow is very important to do.
And the impact that they have can be profound on, future generations. And the fact that you're still talking about him today is, speaks volumes.
And the choice can be good or bad depending on how you decide to deal with it, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is really so cool. Well, let me ask one last question. What's a unique challenge or a unique way that you overcome challenges? What's something that you use to overcome challenges and how can others apply it?
So when it comes to navigating the complexities of today's modern world, I believe, like I've mentioned a number of times, that intuition and self-reflection are two of the most powerful tools that can guide us. And specifically what I talk about a lot is our career fulfillment, but you can talk about life fulfillment in general. we're living in this world that's referred to as the VUCA world, and this is a world characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And because this world is, rapidly changing, it's essential to have a strategy that helps us make sense of our past, right? Our past experiences, and then use those to chart a course for our future. So this is why I developed, and I referenced it before, but a framework that I refer to as the 4-quadrant strategy to career fulfillment. Again, you can, change out career and life, but what this framework combines is the wisdom of trusting your intuition and the valuable insights that you've gained from your past experiences. So as I mentioned, the 4-quadrant strategy, if you think of a piece of paper, drawing a line down the middle and then a line across the center, it's now 4 quadrants. And in the first top left quadrant, think of things where you have been successful and where you are thriving, and write them down. And the bottom left quadrant, you want to write down areas where you're not yet successful, but you want to learn more about it. So think of those as your learning opportunities. Now, switching over to the right side, in the top right corner, you want to write areas where you are successful, but don't really care to pursue more of it. And then in the bottom right quadrant, you want to write down areas where you have responsibilities, you're not necessarily, the go-to person for them, and you don't care to pursue moving forward. So again, with this overall framework and engaging with it, you don't want to overthink your answers, right? We want to trust our gut instincts. We want to trust our intuition. And this allows our initial thoughts to be exactly as they are. No judgment, just writing down our responses. And after we've completed, we take time to reflect on these answers. And then we evaluate, hey, how do these answers align with where I'm currently at in my career or in my life? And how can they be used towards my future aspirations? And then again, you embrace that intuition, you embrace the self-reflection process, and you gain clarity for what you value as a professional, what you value as just a human being, and you can use it for areas of growth moving forward.
And that is a pretty cool set of techniques that I think anyone can use. And clearly, it's a way where you can discover and learn and grow, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't, sometimes you might hear a framework and might say, wow, that sounds pretty simple and easy. But at the same time, sometimes it's those simple and easy things that we need to do that can really propel us and can have a profound impact on our futures.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be, as I would say, magical to be something that's valuable to do. Well, Alicia, I really want to thank you for being with us on Unstoppable Mindset. And clearly you demonstrate that kind of a mindset. If people want to reach out to you and maybe talk to you about being a coach or helping them, how do they do that?
Certainly. They can go to mindfulcareerpath.com, and all of my social media links are there, or they can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Alicia Ramsdell on there, so it wouldn't be hard to find me. Spell
that for me, though, if you would. Alicia Ramsdell.
Sure. Alicia, last name Ramsdell.
So reach out to Alicia. Clearly lots of good information, and I think she's a very thoughtful individual that can add value to all of us. And one of the things that I love to do in having these conversations is I get to learn. And I figure if I'm not learning at least as much as other people, then I'm not doing my job for me and for anyone else well. So I really value the time that you have taken, and I really value the lessons that you've taught me and hopefully others today. So I really appreciate that. So thank you for being here. And I want to thank you all for listening out there. We would really appreciate you commenting on Alicia's conversation with us today. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset. Please give us your comments and your thoughts. We love them. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, I would invite you to do that. Please reach out. You can email me at michaelhi, michaelhi, at accessibe, accessibe.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And in Michael Hingson is michaelhingson.com/podcast. So hope that you enjoyed today, that you learned something from it. Reach out to Alicia. And I have to say, once again, Alicia, thank you for your review about Thunderdog.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And while you're at it, everyone go out on Amazon and pick up Thunderdog.
Wow. Well, thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it.